Alright, so let's talk about Rotwood, Klei's latest game, just released in early access a few days ago. And it's more of an action-style dungeon crawler with heavy emphasis on the co-op elements. You can have up to 4 players in a game. You know, right now they're in early access, so things are subject to change. We're also due for more content as they go through the process. The usual early access spiel. But I wanted to do a quick weapon overview on the weapons that we do have. You know, just to kind of get the knowledge out there and just kind of let people know what's going on, right? So there are 4 basic weapons in the game right now. There are more to come, I'm sure. You know, 4 unique weapons for 4 players. For a max party game, you want every player to have their own unique mechanic. So we have 4 weapons right now. And they all have different feels, different strengths and weaknesses, you know, different effects and different playstyles. So we're gonna go through all 4. We're gonna do a high-level overview, nothing too crazy. You know, the game is pretty simple if you're familiar with action games, but some of these weapons do have more advanced mechanics that are worth bearing in mind that, you know, some people may not be aware of or may not even be considering. So we'll talk about them. You know, first the hammer. You start the game with the hammer. It's your basic big stick. It does a lot of damage per hit. You know, it tends to have a slower startup, tends to have slower recovery, tends to have a lot of multi-hitting attacks, you know, wide area of effect attacks and whatnot, as you'd expect from a hammer. Now, pretty simple to understand. It does have a few advanced mechanics when it comes to like combos. You can do like specific dash combos, and you can do charge hits and things. For example, you can do this if I can get it. You can do that combo. You have combination attacks for more damage. And you can do stuff like that. And then its focus hit effect is pretty simple to understand as well, pretty easy to trigger. If you hit multiple units with a hammer swing strike, you'll get a focus hit. And then if you do special attacks and certain attacks and charge up your heavy swing, you'll do focus hits as well. So just a few attacks like that, charge that up. That's probably a better example. You can also charge this. And then of course you have the dash attack. The dash combo, the last hit will actually call the focus hit as well. Yeah, so pretty easy to understand. You can also get a focus hit using the skill by charging it up. You know, you can decide to charge it or not to charge it. Obviously, if you charge it, it takes longer to execute, and there's a pro and con to that. Pretty basic weapon to understand. Very decent starter weapon, and pretty simple overall, right? Again, it does have a few advanced mechanics to it, but it's pretty easy to understand. The next basic weapon is a spear. You know, again, it's pretty simple. It's a pointy stick. You stick them with the pointy end. This is more about range. This is more about controlling space. So generally you can hit up close, but if you hit up close, you don't get any focus hits. You only get focus hits when you hit with the tip, which is basically like, you know, that pointy end. It is a spear. So every attack you do when it's hitting with the tip will actually do focus hits, which is a really good way to rack up damage. When enemies get too close, you can use the skill to knock them back, stun them and knock them away. Just go back to, you know, sticking them with the pointy end. And of course you have this spear drill, which can hit multiple units, and when that happens, it will prop focus hits for every spear attack in the combo, right? Again, pretty easy to understand, more about space management. I'd say it's the first weapon that really makes you start thinking about managing a resource. If you're familiar with action games, space can be an important resource, especially when you're fighting a lot of enemies. And in general, just avoiding them by repositioning yourself can be huge. So the spear is a nice way to really make you start thinking about that. You know, managing some type of resource, as opposed to the hammer, which is just batching things, really. Although with the hammer, you are managing time as a resource. That's a bit more esoteric. But yeah, hammer and spear. Pretty easy to understand. We get to the more complicated weapons now. The striker and the cannon are like, you know, as I like to call them, the ball and the gun, essentially. The striker is an interesting weapon because this is the first time where you have to really start managing a resource outright, because you start with these 2 balls called strikers. They're basically soccer balls or volleyballs, what have you, beach balls. And with this weapon, you have a light attack, which is really just a basic combo. But with the strikers, you're throwing them as a ranged weapon. So you throw them, they hit the enemy. If you hit them or throw them in the air, you do focus hits, which will do extra damage. So a lot of the time, basically, you're just kind of focusing on hitting these things into enemies before they hit the ground, keeping them off the ground for as long as possible. At a high level, it's pretty easy to understand. You throw the ball, you hit the ball, you keep hitting it into the enemy over and over again until they're dead. But when you start getting more advanced, you can really start doing some interesting things. You can start taking advantage of like more advanced mechanics like dodge canceling to kind of extend your combo. You can also use them as like traps or helpers. If you're familiar with characters like that in action games and fighting games where they have like helpers that come and interrupt the enemy and allow them to extend their combos and stuff like that, they can be useful for that. Again, they can you can interact with them even when you're not holding them, so they can be a good defensive tool as well. For example, if you run up to a striker and hit it, that can kind of interrupt an enemy without needing to waste time actually picking it up first and throwing it. So it can be pretty interesting to use. If you get really advanced, you can start doing like close and long range combos that take advantage of the focus hit and dodge cancels, stuff like that, to get as much damage as quickly as possible. And, you can do a lot of different things. It's a more complicated weapon. It is really starting to rely on how you interact with it. I'd say it's a more creative weapon. You can do some really interesting things though. And the last weapon, let's look at the cannon right now, because the cannon's going to be pretty complicated. This is a more advanced weapon. Again, at the cannon, you have limited ammunition. This is the only weapon in the game so far where you need to manage ammunition. So you start with 6 bullets, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then you can't do anything else. You have to reload. It's really important to keep stock of how much ammunition you have, because for the last 3 hits in your clip, all of those are going to be focus hits. So the first hits are normal, and then the cannon starts glowing blue, and then all of those are focus hits. So if I reload just to show you, that's a normal hit, that's a normal hit, and that's a normal hit. But then once the head of the cannon glows blue, focus hit, focus hit, focus hit. That's going to be really important for a number of reasons. Mainly the cannon's pretty easy to understand. At the top level, you have a light attack, which is to shoot. Unlike the other weapons, you don't have a dodge button. You have a shotgun blast, which acts as your dodge button. So if I do that, I'm invincible. You can chain it into a combo as well to get as far away as possible. Of course, it uses ammunition, so once you're out of ammunition, you can no longer dodge, essentially. You're kind of stuck and you have to reload again. Yeah, so it's at a high level, you can already see it's going to be more difficult to keep track of what you need to do on the field. I mean, in co-op, it might be easy enough because you'll be able to gain some space, run away, reload while your friends are kind of beating things up, and then you'll get back into the fray. Occasionally, you'll do something like that to get away. And then its special skill gives you ammunition every time you hit, so if you're in close range, you don't have time to actually reload, you can do that and get more ammunition. For example, I have none. I hit him twice, I get 2 bullets. Pretty easy to understand. The interesting thing about the cannon, though, is that, it has what we call a stance in action game terminology. A stance is basically a move that allows you to do other moves out of it. So by default, it's the reload stance, so when you go into reload, you'll hold the cannon like that. And then if you press the reload button again, you'll actually reload it and you get your ammunition back. But just depending on the button you press, you can do different things. So for example, if you use the heavy button or the shotgun blast button, you'll get a mortar shot. And you can do that. If you use the shoot button, you'll get a ground pound, which is like a close range AoE attack. So you'll get that. Hits multiple enemies. Of course, it's worth mentioning that all of these skills also take the last 3 shots bonus into consideration. So this mortar shot is with the last 3 bullets. That's going to be a focus shot versus this mortar shot, which has I think 4 bullets, which is not going to be a focus hit. So that still takes it into consideration. Same for the ground pound. If I do like 4 and then do a ground pound, that's not going to be a focus hit ground pound. If I have 3 or less, the focus hit ground pound. And then the last ability is the rocket. Basically, if you use the skill button out of the reload stance, you'll go flying away, which is a good way to gain distance, you know, when you need to get away from a crowd. You know, the actual rocket blast will do damage, but it's usually minimal damage. Like if I do that, it's not a whole lot, it's more of an escape tool. When you need to get away quickly, maybe you don't have a lot of bullets left, so you can't do a lot of shotgun blasts to get away. Maybe you're on your last bullet and you just need to get away, you know, and then you need to reload or something. It's an interesting weapon, you know, it has a lot going on. When you get into the flow of things, it becomes the combination of managing your ammunition, trying to get the last hit bonuses, trying to save your special reload abilities for that time. You know, maybe you're trying to get a last hit mortar shell. You also need to be careful with how many bullets you have, because depending on the number of bullets, you can actually make the cannon backfire. So for example, I have a full cannon right now. If I try to do the mortar shot, it's going to damage me and increase recovery time. If I have 6 bullets, you know, it's a very powerful blast, and you take damage on the field. You take like 25 damage when you do that. Same is true for the rocket blast. You know, you have too many bullets. Same is true for the ground pound. Again, you have too many bullets. So generally, you have to keep track of ammunition because you need it to do moves. You also need to keep track of ammunition because if you have too much, you can hurt yourself. It can be detrimental. Depending on how much ammunition you have, even when you don't hurt yourself, you can increase recovery time of moves. For example, you know, this is a 3 bullet what's the word, ground pound. You can see how quickly that recovers versus a 4 bullet ground pound, maybe a 5 bullet ground pound. You know, that's way too much, versus even a 1 bullet ground pound, which is really fast. See? That's going to be a bit different, so you have to manage the resource in that sense. And that's going to be true for every move. You know, the trebuchet, the mortar shot's going to be the same thing. That's more powerful, but if I do like a smaller mortar shot, it's not as the recoil's not as bad. You know, it's going to be true for the rocket shot as well. If I do like a 4 bullet rocket shot, it's going to take a bit longer to recover versus like a 3 or 2 or 1 bullet rocket shot. If I do like a 2 bullet just to show it off, you see how quick that is. So you have to keep that in mind as well. And then also the reload abilities also have a timing mechanic as well. So by default, the normal reload is going to look like that. You know, it's a kind of middling length, maybe like a 3-second reload. You know, you can also do a quick reload, where you kind of just do it in 1 second and you don't waste as much time. You can also do it too fast and you bobble the cannon and it takes even longer than a standard reload. The same is true for all the abilities. So you can do like a quick mortar shot and then it doesn't have as much recovery. You can do a slower mortar shot and have more recovery. You can overshoot it and then it takes a bit longer to execute and recover. And the same is going to be true for all the moves as well. Doesn't matter what move you do. And that's the timing mechanic. A pretty advanced weapon just because of all the things you need to be aware of. And then obviously, you know, while you're doing all of that, your dodge also uses ammunition, right? So you have to be aware of all of that. It is pretty advanced. At a high level, it's pretty simple. You know, you shoot gun from a distance, you reload. Occasionally you shoot bombs. But as you kind of start playing, getting into the mix of things and getting into the flow, it can be pretty complicated. But yeah, that's the overview of the weapons we have now. I'm sure we'll get more over time. You know, it is the start of early access. It started literally like maybe 2 or 3 days ago. And I just wanted to cover it because I've been playing for a while. I've been picking these things up. I'm not really following content, but I'm pretty sure they're going to be things that, you know, other people aren't covering just because it's a pretty chill game. I don't think most sweaty action game players are really going to be that interested in digging deep, but I just do it out of habit. Yeah, but let me know if it's useful. In terms of this game, I might cover stuff like this in the future. Just things that I think wouldn't really be obvious to most players.